His distinctive voice has sent shivers down the spines of countless elected officials. He sought answers to his straightforward questions from a wide range of people, from the average Joe all the way up to the President of the United States. He served as an anchor for ABC News. He's co-hosted the Sunday magazine show This Week and made the rounds on the late-night talk shows. Hello, I'm Ernie Manouse. Coming up on Interviews, our conversation with award-winning journalist and best-selling author Sam Donaldson. How much of what you do you view as a performance?
Well, anyone who's on television, if they say to you that there's no performance in that, they're just a lowly scribe doing their work as a reporter, is either fooling you or fooling themselves. So there is some performance. You know, one of my rules of life at this advanced age is that life is too short to associate with dull people. And that goes for a television audience, too. Watching the news now. I'm not talking about watching Lost or any of the other entertainment shows. If you are dull, if somehow there's something off-putting about the way you deliver the news or even the way you look, people are going to tune you out. You're going to lose your job. So, yes, you put on a little makeup. You try to pronounce the words properly. You hope that you don't scare small children. And, of course, there's some part of it that's performance.
Is that a part of it you enjoy or don't like?
Again, anyone who does what I do willingly for all these years, if we didn't have some little ham in us, we again would be fooling ourselves. But it's the minimum part. If that were the major part, I don't see how you could succeed. It's like saying, I want to get rich in the news business. We're not going to get rich in the news business. Or for that matter, in any business, if that simply is your goal. If you get rich, it's because of the work you do. If you sell stock as a stockbroker, if you're a good stockbroker, you sell a lot of stock, you have a lot of clients, you may accumulate some wealth. But if you start out saying, my goal is to accumulate wealth, but you don't do those other things, you're not going to make it. So from the standpoint of presentation, while it's important, if you don't have the goods as a reporter, if you don't know what you're talking about, if your credibility isn't tested by the audience and found to be high, you're not going to make it simply because you'd like to.
Yeah. What was your goal? What did you want to achieve in this career?
I didn't have any. I mean, but that I came to the news business just kind of by trial and error. You know, Bill Clinton tells us that at the age of 9, he knew he wanted to be president of the United States. I find that remarkable. Yeah. I mean, at the age of 9, he looked around this country and said, there are problems here. I think I can be part of the solution now. He was an abused child. And as Reverend Jesse Jackson says, you want to be somebody, and I think he simply saw that the presidency of the United States was somebody, and he wanted to do it. Well, if I looked at the news business, as I did in college, I worked for radio stations in El Paso. I played music. I was a disc jockey, had a great time. I went in the Army, spent 2.5 years there, got out, went down to Dallas, tried some other things, and finally decided, well, let me go back into what I'd done in school and what I knew. And then began to be serious about the news business. It had come to me kind of late, if you look at someone who at 9 knew what he wanted to do.
But when you were 8 years old, if I remember the story correctly, there is a Cub Scout photo or a photo of you with a microphone.
Yeah.
So
I was pretending to read the war news, the Second World War news. I'm an old guy. In my Cub Scout uniform, because with my mother every night we'd listen to the 9 o'clock news, and it was the war news. And I pretended to read it, but I had no idea of what I was doing. Was there a First Amendment that people needed to know things? I guess what you saw there was someone who liked to talk. I like to talk. How many minutes do you have? You say you have 3 hours here?
Yeah, no, not quite.
Okay.
So that's love of talking, though. If you hadn't gone into this profession, you wouldn't have been a rancher. You wouldn't have gone that route, do you think?
No, I would have been a rancher. My father was born in 1871. Ulysses Grant was president of the United States. I didn't say my grandfather or great-grandfather. I said my father. Yeah. And he bought his first piece of farmland in the territory of New Mexico in 1910. I come from a farming and ranching family. Now, he hasn't been doing it for a number of years, as you can imagine. I'm the last one in the family, so I still try to carry it on. But if I hadn't come east, finally at the age of 26 for the first time, and pursued this business, if I hadn't had some modicum of success, and I almost at one point early on said I can't make it and I'll just go back home, I would have been a farmer and rancher all my life.
Really? How do you think it's affected you that, as I understand, your father had passed before you were born?
Yes.
How does that change a boy, a man? I guess there were troubled teens for you at some degree.
Well, not really. I didn't have a father. He died about 7.5 months before I was born. I make the point. I never missed him. I didn't know what it was to have a father. I had a good mother. And at age 14, I was kind of rambunctious, not in the sense of today's people who may get picked up at 14 for first-degree murder or something. But I hadn't learned a valuable lesson, but the next step taught it to me. She sent me to New Mexico Military Institute in Roswell, New Mexico, where I learned that the world did not owe me anything, that I wasn't the center of the universe, that I couldn't just have my way in what I wanted to do because I'm me. It was a shock to have the old cadets at New Mexico Military Institute put me up against the wall. In those days, they had physical hazing, and I'm glad it's been done away with. Yeah. And take a rifle or a coat hanger or a paddle or a toothbrush and beat my bare behind. That was quite a shock because I hadn't polished my brass. I came out without a shoe shine. I was late to formation. Yeah. So I learned quickly that it's better to be with the winners in this world than the losers. It's better to be someone who follows the rules and is successful rather than someone who's always opposing the rules and is unsuccessful.
Right.
So those two influences, my mother and the military school, were what I think gave me the opportunity to go forward.
When you talk about being with the winners as opposed to the losers, your first major news job in television outside of local station was with ABC News, who at the time weren't the winners. Did that offer you certain freedoms, though, working for the underdog, that you could be more of a rebel?
I was so lucky. I worked for a local station in Washington, then owned by the Washington Post, and it did very well. And at the age of 32 and a half, or maybe 33, I was settling in, and I was the anchor of the early evening newscast. You know, everything was fine. And I would love to have had CBS or NBC, the two big networks, offer me a job. I hadn't applied, but I thought, you know, will they come to me? And they didn't. ABC came to me, and as you say, our anchorman at the time, shortly after I joined them, Frank Reynolds, used to joke that if you were on the FBI 10 most wanted list, best place to hide was to become the anchorman of the ABC Evening News. And someone else joked that if, you know, you could put the Vietnam War on ABC, it would be canceled in 13 weeks, and no problem there. But the advantage was this. I didn't have much competition within the organization. All the smart people were at CBS and NBC. Had they hired me, I'd be 19th in line for the plum assignments and maybe never get there. At ABC, within weeks, I found myself being given plum assignments. And I had prepared from the standpoint of having worked for years in the news business and on television and in Washington, and I was prepared to go forward, and therefore I was able to do that.
Before we go too far forward, I want to know about Sam's show. There was a jingle to that show.
Well, as I've told you, I was a disc jockey when I went to school in El Paso, Texas. Worked for local stations, and I had a show between 4 and 5. In those days, ladies and gentlemen, I know it comes as a shock to you out there, if you wanted to listen to music on the radio, you had to look in the newspaper to find out what time it was on. There were no wall-to-wall music stations, or certainly no talk stations. And I had a music show for an hour, and it was called, appropriately, Sam's Show. And I used the record that Bing Crosby and his son Gary had cut. Here's a happy tune they love to croon. They call it Sam's Song. And I'd say, hello there, this is Sam. Nothing on your mind. And then you find you're humming Sam's Song. Come on in here, listen to the music today. I mean, it was great. I had some sort of an audience, and once in a while people would write me and say, well, I'd like a picture of you. And I thought to myself, okay, so I said on the air one day, I said, now look, fair is fair. You send me your picture, and I'll send you mine. And I found 2 or 3 pictures there being single, and I followed up on. Oh, well.
At what point, though, did journalism become important to you? When did you realize the responsibility that came with all of that? At what point during this path?
I think as I started to work first for WTOP, the local station in Washington, I began to realize what it was all about. And as I progressed, in particular by the time I got to ABC, I think I understood what we were doing. I tell journalism students today, let's face it, you're going to have a heck of a good time. You're not going to make a lot of money. You're not going to be famous. Oh, if Katie Courier, there are a few people, but the vast majority of you. But you're going to have an exciting life. I mean, you know the old saying, do something you enjoy, and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, I never worked a day in my life. However, once you start doing that, you begin to realize the responsibility. And it's not the First Amendment or some high-flown phrase like the people's right to know. It's simply that if you're going to be a reporter, your job is to gather information that you believe to be factual because you've checked it out. Now, it may not be factual. Your sources may have burned you, or you may be too dumb to figure it out, or you may be too lazy to have made one more phone call that was necessary to put that information that you had in perspective. But you're trying to make it factual. And if you do that job, then people who get that information can use it. It's up to them to use it any way they want to. But the reason the country, I think, has kept itself on an even keel is the people, the electorate, citizens who run the country, not the smart guys we elect every 2, 4, 6 years in Washington. It's us have information that enable us to say, well, no, I don't care what they say. It looks like it's this rather than that, and I'm going to go vote that way. Or I'm going to go, look, I just heard about a new cancer remedy. My daughter or my wife, and I didn't realize this, we're going to go to the oncologist and ask about it. You have great satisfaction. You can go home, your family says, what'd you do today? You can say, well, look, I found a story, and I did a story, which probably helped some people in one way or the other. And that, along with the fun of being a reporter, that you can't buy that.
With the growth of availability of information, have you seen a change in the electorate? Have you seen the audience change with all of this information we now have?
Well, there have been lots of changes, but unfortunately, I've seen a change that I'm not sure it's going to work itself out for the best, although I think it will eventually work itself out. We used to have a concentration of media. Well, you say, no, that's not right. It's now that we're having this concentration, big corporations owning it. But what I meant by that was we had the newspapers and we had the television, we had the radio, and it all came from generally the same place, although different editorial policies of different newspapers, of course, would look different. Now, the availability, the fragmentation of the way we get our news, our information, is breathtaking. I don't need to tell you about cable, but it's the Internet. It's the millions of websites. YouTube? What's that? Did you ever hear of YouTube before they put George Allen and his macaca on? The former senator from the great state of Virginia. So that's changed dramatically. Secondly, the interest in so-called hard news. You know, I guess it's interesting to see Tom Cruise's and Katie Holmes' new baby. And I have no problem with people wanting to see that. But if that takes up valuable news time about a cancer cure, I don't think it's close as to what we should be doing or what people should really be interested in the first place. Let me give you a statistic. The 3 commercial networks, even with this fragmentation of available sources for news, still gather together about 30 million people each weeknight, ABC, CBS, and NBC. The average age of our audience is 60. The average age of Americans is 35. Young people are not watching us. They are watching Jon Stewart. They are watching the Internet. They are blogging. They are getting their information in many ways. Well, I'm not a purist in the sense that you've got to watch me or else it can't be right. But the problem is so often the people from whom they're getting information aren't checking it out. They're not dedicated to bringing you what they think to be facts. They're just throwing out a lot of stuff.
Right.
You go on the Internet today, you'll find that Lyndon Johnson organized the conspiracy to kill John F. Kennedy. You'll find that the Holocaust never existed. It's a myth. You'll find that a U.S. Navy submarine shot down TW-800. All wrong and all dangerous from the standpoint of misinformation getting in the minds of people who then use it. Hey, it says here that submarines shoot down our airplanes. I'm going to vote against the defense budget. I'm making that up. But you see, information is a great tool if it's accurate. If it is inaccurate, it is a great danger. And I'm afraid that, to some extent, is what's happening.
with the rise of all this, then, do you think the network news organizations have to put more concentration in making sure everything they do is right? Or is there a laxing off in all of this?
Well, I think we have to, and I don't think there's a laxing off, if you will, but there's a change in the dynamic. Now, we're in business. We're in a capitalistic society. And with all of its drawbacks, I don't know of a better system. You bring me one, I'll take a look at it. I'd like to say I have an open mind. Communism obviously doesn't work. And we have stockholders, all the big corporations. Now, I'm telling you what you already know. Someone has to pay for the lights and the stockholders' dividends and all of this. Now, if nobody's watching, because my competitors are showing you Katie Holmes' baby, and I'm telling you about the hole in the ozone layer, which if we don't solve the problem, will kill us all from melanoma. But if no one is watching me, I'm going to go out of business. So I'm going to find, if not Katie's baby, I can find the Snoop got arrested the other day. Hey, we should tell that story, don't you? Second time he's been arrested, found drugs and guns in his car. I can do that and not do the hole in the ozone story. And I will. Because let's take my friend Jim Lair, a fellow Texan, if you will, does the most responsible, in-depth news program Monday through Friday on television, in my opinion, the News Hour. Mm-hmm. He could not do that in commercial television without the grants that he has and the PBS money. And he's an honest guy. He'll tell you that. He couldn't do it.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be enough audience for people who buy advertising time to buy his show.
But wasn't there a time once when the news division lost money?
Yes.
It was the entertainment business that made the money,
yes.
And this was a responsibility to the audience.
Absolutely. When those three big networks that I've mentioned were rolling in dough because that's all you could watch, we had 98+% of the audience in the United States watching television. There was no cable. There was no Ted Turner with his superstation. There was no internet. You had to watch us. And advertisers would line up to buy availabilities for the primetime shows, Gunsmoke, The Fugitive, and all of that. And the news departments didn't have to make money, and the bosses didn't demand that we make money. So we were free to say, look, this is what I think you should know. We honestly believe these are the stories that are important to you. We hope you all watch, but if you don't watch, hey, it's okay with us. Go with God, my son.
Right.
Once the fragmentation occurred, and the advertisers said, no, not only are we not going to pay that amount of money, we're going to have a 50% cut or we go someplace else, we couldn't afford to take that attitude of, hey, if you don't want to watch, it's okay with us. Oh, we could do that, but our bosses would replace us. Mm-hmm. And if we felt strong enough about it, we should get out of the business and go do something else. So that was what caused bosses to come to the news departments about 1970, mid-70s, and say, boys, the free ride is over. You now have to make money. We couldn't raise our rates. We were losing audience. And if we were losing audience, how could we get people who weren't watching the news to watch? Well, we can do that. We can do this story. It's not that important, but it's interesting. It's interesting, and so we can do that. And as Don Hewitt, the great creator of 60 Minutes, has said, it was a race to the bottom. We're looking for the lowest common denominator to get the last person out there who has a television set and wouldn't watch a news program if their life depended on it to watch us.
Yeah.
It's bad for the news business. It's bad for serious journalism. I wish I had the answers to how we could do it otherwise. I don't know.
Will it swing around again, do you think? Or is it?
Well, if we have another Cold War, if America suddenly discovers, as it did for so many years of my life, that thermonuclear missiles with a range of about 27 minutes from the Soviet Union and 7 minutes from their submarines could destroy us, it might fix the mind like hanging. Well, better find out what's going on in the world. Maybe it does have to do with me. I talk to young people today from time to time, believe it or not, trying to find out what they think. Hey, I don't think Iraq has anything to do with them. They're not interested in voting. Now, some are, obviously. Right. Well, maybe if there was a threat, and I'm not saying bring back the Soviet Union, although I think Brother Putin is on his way to bringing back an autocratic, dangerous Russia. This former KGB colonel is no Democrat. And even though our current president met him for 90 minutes and came out saying, I think I looked into his soul and found an honest man, I don't believe it. So if that should come back, then maybe people will say, I got to find out something. But it doesn't mean they'll come to ABC anymore, or CBS or NBC.
talking about, in a sense, the dumbing down of America. There was the show, the Ali G show.
Ah.
Same guy who brings us Borat. You ended up on that show. How does that come to happen?
Well, I got a letter one day. People from other countries and their television systems had often been asking me for interviews about politics. I got a letter from London on an impressive letterhead. I'd never heard of the company, saying, "Dear Mr. Donaldson, you are one of the premier reporters of politics in the United States."
They had you
Yes,
already.
of course they had me, right, naturally. And we would like to interview you for a program that we do that's quite popular and appeals to young people about American politics. Well, okay. I said to my assistant, set it up. So I came back from lunch one day, she'd set it up, and I walked into the studio, and it took me about 3 nanoseconds to realize I was in, as father would say, deep doo-doo. Here was this guy in strange garb. "Oh, come, glad to see you. Come, just sit down here." Uh-oh, I've been had. Now, when you realize you've been had, you can do one of two things. You can stalk out of the room with the cameras rolling in high dudgeon, or you can sit down and try to tough it out. We Texans, we tough, So I sat down. So Ali G starts in on me. He said, he says, "Now, this water wheel with Nixon." I said, "Wait," I said, that was Watergate. And I said, "There's, White Water. And Water World was a movie." "Oh, well, I did this one." I said, "These people after Nixon. Why do you he's not the military. Just throw him in jail. Just take him in." I said, "Well, the Constitution of the United States, let me tell you about the Bill of Rights." In other words, I just tried to keep my cool and get through the half hour, whatever it was. And when it was over, I walked out. Now, some of my friends, Ben Bradley, former executive editor of the Washington Post, or Marlon Fitzwater, the great press secretary to number 41, George Herbert Walker Bush, in the middle of the interview, they just jumped up and said, "That's enough of this. I don't have to listen to this foolishness." And, of course, that's what he wanted. That was exactly the kick. So I met Sacha Cohen.
Yeah.
He no longer does that. He went on to great success with Borat. One of the reasons he no longer does it, everyone's on to him. He can't get it, impressive letterhead or not.
They're on to him.
Doesn't get anybody.
Do you think it's problematic, though, when folks like you become celebrities, when they want an interview with you, when you become, in a sense, in some cases, bigger than the story? How do you balance that out?
Well, you shouldn't become bigger than the story. You're not the story, although modern times, if you're on television, people see you, stop you on the street, head waiter, or try to give you a better table, even though you don't ask for it. I mean, all of that happens. But it's a big problem. If you're out there doing a stand-up in public, in the public park or someplace, and you want to do that stand-up and bring it back so it can get on the air, and people are, "Hey, Sam, hey, well, nice to see you. Can I have my picture taken with you?" It is a bother. It is not something, but you got to keep your cool. You can't say, "Excuse me, don't bother me, I'm working." "Well, I always heard he was a prig and stuffed up and all of that." If you're at the checkout counter, and I do some grocery shopping once in a while with my wife, and you think that the clerk may have got punched up the wrong number, you better be very careful. The ordinary person will say, "Hey, celery, that's not 18 cents, all that." If you say that, it's in the newspaper that you, this big heavyweight, who does he think he is, Pooh-Bah, oppressing this poor child, this waif, this orphan behind the checkout. No, he said, "Excuse me, could I just see the celery? I mean, are you sure?" I probably made the mistake. You have to go through all of that.
Yeah.
James Watson, who with Crick unlocked the secret of DNA, discovered the double helix, says that when we did that, I knew I was going to be famous. I didn't know I was going to be a celebrity. Celebrityhood is not all, at least for someone like me, it's cracked up to be.
Yeah.
There's as much downside, if not more, than there's upside.
Yeah. How do you gauge then success? At this point in your career, how do you know what to say, "I've made it"? How do you decide that?
Well, I've made it. A while back you asked me about my goals and all of that. I never had a goal to make X number of dollars or to be the anchorman supreme, the Peter Jennings, our late great anchorman of ABC News. I took assignments as they came, and I was very fortunate to get good assignments, and it helped me in my career. It helped me from the standpoint of contracts with the company, sure. But I never thought about, when can I say I made it? I will tell you that when I first came to Washington to work for that local station in February of 1961, I thought, if I can ever make $10,000 a year, I can write back to El Paso, Texas, my friends, and say, "Look at me, I've made it." Well, I've been fortunate. I made a little bit more than that over the years. But I don't know what making it is. I followed politics all these years, and I know what they think of making it. Getting reelected, becoming president of the United States.
Right.
But I've never been driven in that way. And I'm not announcing my nomination tonight either.
Of all the presidents that you've covered, of all the politicians you have been with, who do you think, if you could reelect anyone, who do you think you'd like to see back in the White House?
Well, I'm not going to tell you my personal political leanings. I have them. I've never revealed voluntarily my votes. One time it was revealed involuntarily by someone else. I will only say, as a reporter covering a president, Ronald Reagan was the most interesting, all-round interesting president I've covered. He was the larger-than-life Hollywood figure. He was the great actor. He once told the late David Brinkley, I don't see how a person can be successful as president of the United States if he hadn't been an actor, meaning the bully pulpit. He was in at the time when there were significant events going on in which he participated, the decline of the Soviet Union, etc. I was 5 feet away from John Hinckley when Hinckley shot Ronald Reagan and 3 other people, that kind of thing. So I guess I'd bring back a Ronald Reagan if I were back as a White House correspondent to enjoy covering the person.
Yeah.
But as far as the country is concerned, I'll let each one of your viewers decide who they think was a great president in their lifetime and who they'd like to see reelected.
And let's hope each viewer does go out and vote. Sam Donaldson, thank you so much for sitting down with us.
It's been a pleasure.
A pleasure. Sam Donaldson.
To order a transcript, call 866-652-3378 or send $6.95 to the address on your screen. Please include the name of the guest.